This is a story of an incredible grand structure, alive in its width and margins. Stories of its rulers and moments in time etched on the walls. The events and ceremonies, from simple to dramatic, have sculpted the very identity of this edifice. Built to showcase and preserve the legacy of a dynasty, this place is a masterpiece showered with impeccable craft, reflecting the idea of its creator. An architectural marvel where breathtaking beauty meets admiration and awe. Once a home to the ruling dynasty, Amba Vilas Palace has stood as a cultural icon of the city of our nation. Nestled in the heart of Karnataka's Mysuru, the palace is today a principal landmark of the city, attracting a footfall of thousands of tourists every day. Appreciated for its grandeur and aesthetics, this breathtaking edifice of Indo-Saracenic style of architecture is one of the finest creations of its builder, the Wadiyar dynasty. The dynasty, which had ruled the kingdom of Mysuru from late 14th century till the abolition of princely states after independence.
Two brothers, Yeduraya and his brother, they came from Varanasi. They stayed in one of the old house inside the fort area, where there was a very small area was there. And a lady in that building, she was crying in the night, and they were upset. The two brothers came from that Varanasi, and they asked that what is the problem, why you are crying the whole night. She had only one daughter, and there was a Palegar, a local leader, and his name was Katanayaka. He wanted to marry her next day morning. And that's why they were not happy for that marriage. So these two brothers, they killed him, and they married one of the Yeduraya have married her, and he established a Wadiyar family in the Mysuru.
There was a chieftain called Maranayaka who was troubling the Maharani of Mysore. So they come to the Kodi Bhairaveshwara temple first, and then there was a Jangama who asks them to help the family by waging war against Maranayaka, and later they kill him, and then the daughter is given in marriage to the older brothers. The two brothers were called Yeduraya and Krishnaraya. The older brother was Yeduraya, and then he marries the daughter, princess, and then that is how the dynasty is established. And they adopt, then they ask the Jangama how, what they could do, and Jangama tells them to adopt his name as their surname. That is how Wadiyar name got affixed.
While the large part of palace is now owned by the government, the remaining portion, intimate and away from the daily footfall of tourists and visitors, still serves as a residence of Wadiyars. Known for the rich legacy and zeal to preserve the history, the Wadiyar dynasty is today synonymous with the city's identity.
Actually, they are not warmongers. They had no intention of extending their territory. But whoever attacking them, they used to attack on them, get back their place. From the beginning, even for Srirangpatna and Mysore, there was the Marathas were fighting against these people. Actually, one history says the Wadiyars of Mysore were feudatories for the Vijayanagara rulers. After the downfall of Vijayanagara, they became very strong.
Mysore, which is often termed as a cultural capital of Karnataka, is also a city of palaces. Structures dating to early medieval period provide the glimpse of city's past with Vijayanagara Empire, the Wadiyar dynasty and the era of Tipu Sultan's rule. But it is Amba Vilas Palace or simply the Mysore Palace which has stood as testimony of its creator's brilliance.
There are several palaces across the country. Each has its own architecture and importance. Specifically, this Mysore Palace is, over a period of time, it's added on. Earlier, it was made of wood. The front facade was wood. Then fire breaks out towards the 1800s, end of 1800s, and then this was built. But this palace, over a period of time, it has got that old, the oldest part is still there, which is the materials and the architecture of that time, materials which were used of that time. And later, it's in stages. You can see the stages even now in the building. But the front portion, which is mainly, which is allowed for public to visit, that is the result of the fire accident. So it's because of that fire, they used materials which are fireproof.
What we see today is a fourth version of the palace, which has housed the Wadiyars ever since the establishment of the kingdom in Mysore. The records about earliest of two palaces are somewhat hazy, but it's believed that the earliest of palace was a wooden fortress built by Wadiyars as early as in the 14th century. The first ever palace was struck by lightning in the year 1638. A second version of palace was rebuilt by Kantirava Narasa Raja Wadiyar, who extended the existing structures by adding new pavilions. But the palace too was short-lived, part due to elements and partly due to political instability. No palace stood for 5 years between the years 1794 to 1799, as the city of Mysore was nearly deserted after plague and cholera had gripped the area.
Actually, what we have here, this is the fourth palace, same place, same foundation. What we have this the Amba Vilas Palace. Earlier to that, there were 3 palaces were there, but the first palace history is not known to the common man and no proper records. 1794, the palace opened because of the thunder lightning and it was unfit for occupation. So all the royal family members shifted from there to the Nazarbad. There they were placed. But there was no palace 1794 to 1799.
Tipu Sultan, the ruler of Mysore for a brief interregnum in the latter 18th century, too wanted to build a palace in the same area. But the constant warfare with the British kept him tied to military requirements. It was only after Tipu Sultan's death the Wadiyars shifted back to Mysore and built a new wooden palace.
But Tipu wanted to build another palace there, and he have demolished this palace and dwelling houses. And he wanted to build two palaces in Mysore city, one in Nazirabad and the same place where we have the Amba Vilas Palace. But he was not able to build the palace because he was involved much in the war. One thing we had to know in the history, during that time, there were 16 temples in that area. The temple we have, even now we have the temple from the Chola period and or Vijayanagara period, and between we have the Hoysala temple also. All these declared monuments. But he has not demolished any temple there.
The Grand Palace's third version, constructed in wood in the year 1801, stood for nearly 100 years on the same ground. In 1897, it met with an unfortunate fate when a fire engulfed its front facade and then the whole palace at the wedding ceremony of Princess Jaya Lakshmani.
Palace which is called wooden palace by using rosewood, teakwood, ivory, sandalwood, silver. Very important. Silver doors were there, and it was well painted on all the sides. This palace, and they shifted in 1801 from Srirangpatna to that palace. They lived in that palace till 1897. In 1897, the wooden palace got the fire. How it got the fire? It is again not proper records are there, but people say, of course, it happened on the marriage day of the first daughter of the Chamraja Wadiyar the 10th.
While the first family shifted to nearby Jaganmohan Palace as its makeshift home, there were calls from the city residents to rebuild the palace. Something that has stood as a symbol or identity of the city as well as the kingdom of Mysore. It was then Maharaja Krishnaraja Wadiyar IV and his mother Maharani Kempananjamanni Devi decided to build a new palace.
People were upset and they were asking the royal family members, do something for this. Then the Krishnaraja Wadiyar IV and his mother decided to build the present palace in 1897 itself, and in November.
He was a unique person with unique taste, and he wanted the best for his people in terms of facilities, welfare schemes, everything. And then he wanted something unique for Mysore and people who were visiting Mysore, and anything he did stood out in that particular thing, and the palace also is an example of that.
British architect Lord Henry Irwin, the man behind iconic imperial buildings in India during late 19th and early days of 20th century, was tasked with the principal designing and layout of the palace. The Viceregal Lodge of Shimla and the American College of Madurai were among his other creations that have stood by till date. BP Raghavallu Naidu, an executive engineer in the Mysore division who conducted elaborate architectural studies of the buildings and monuments of Delhi, Madras and Calcutta in those days, was chosen to oversee the construction.
They appointed one person by called Henry Irwin. He made the plan of the architectural design of that plant particularly. And then the second, Raghavallu Naidu, he was in Calcutta. He was brought to Mysore and he was given as a technical advisor as a civil engineer. So both of them started building this 1897 and completed 80% of the palace in 1907. So Gruha Pravesham have taken place in 1907 and the completion took place in 1912.
Henry Irwin and Raghavallu Naidu chose Indo-Saracenic style of architecture for the palace, a style which is often seen as an amalgam of decorative elements from Indo-Islamic architecture and the classical Indian style. They also drew inspiration from styles and motifs of indigenous Hindu temple architecture, which could be seen on several ornate parts of Amba Vilas.
There are different areas are meant for different purposes, like the Darbar Hall is used basically during Dasara for Darbar, because those days it was pre-independence days. They had, apart from the Mysoreans and the relatives, they also had European Darbar. To accommodate the number of invitees and local people.
The imagination to build a masterpiece led Maharaja Krishnaraja Wadiyar to explore several works of art in India and abroad, and especially in Europe. The elaborate artwork on these tinted glasses and fresco on ceilings are today counted as amongst the finest of Krishnaraja Wadiyar's inspiration from European art of the Renaissance period.
Here in this palace, we saw that all type of religious art and architecture. Do you want Hindu, like Islamic, like Christian, like Gothic, and entire thing was influenced by the Persian style. And that is art and architecture was the common art and architecture in 1900. But the Maharaja, the taken that art and architecture, and they wanted to, by he himself, what he wanted the style, what he wanted the architectural style, so they designed like that. So for example, if you go to the Darbar Hall, there is some ceiling paintings is there. See, that is a ceiling painting, the influence by the Vatican City. So in Vatican City, we saw that the Christianity, but here in this palace, we saw that Hindu religion style, like the Hindu religion style, like what you call the Hindu mythological stories, like Vishnu Dashavataras and the 12 zodiac signs, and like Ashtadikpalakas, all mythological story will be painted on the ceilings. So that is all the influence by the Vatican City's church styles.
It is an amalgamation of different architectural styles of secular architecture. That is, as I already told, it is the Indo-Saracenic style is there, Indo-Islamic architectural arches and other things are there, the traditional Indian architectural style is there, and special wooden architecture is there. So all this amalgamation have taken place for the construction of this palace. And there are so many imported material are there. For example, if you go to the Kalyan Mantapa, the huge hall, there are a lot of cast iron pillars, which is more than 50 feet in height. Those pillars have been brought from London. It is manufactured in Glasgow company. The date and information is given on the bottom of each pillar. It is brought from there. And the next is the wood from Burma. and the tiles from France. On the top you can see the stained glasses, that is from Italy, and lights from Czechoslovakia. It's all we have records in that.
Built at the cost of nearly 43 lakh rupees in those days, Amba Vilas, the Palace of Dreams, was completed in the year 1912. The palace initially had just one meeting hall, beside a number of colossal courtyards, beautiful gardens, corridors, and huge private rooms. Forming the first sight of the palace from even a far distance, these 145 feet towers atop with beautifully chiseled domes gives an ultimate grandeur to three-story stone and fine granite structure. Like the principal architectural theme of Amba Vilas Palace, the domes too have stood as the finest of example of Indo-Saracenic style. The superstructure, measuring 245 by 156 feet, surrounded by continuous walking path, gardens and ceremonial arena, has 5 main entrances. The East Gate, also known as Jai Martanda, opens only during grand Dasara celebrations for the royals or on special occasion for dignitaries. The South Gate, called Varaha, and North Gate, called Balarama Jayarama, are today used for public entry. And the 2 gates on western side, Brahmapuri and Karikallu Thotti, are used by the royals, VIPs and their staff. Once closer to the palace, these fancy arches adorning the front facade inspires awe. Symbolizing good fortune, prosperity and wealth, the sculpture of Gajalakshmi with 2 elephants is seated atop the central arch. 2 small arches stand adjacent to the central arch gateway, followed by 3 arches on the either sides. It is this piece of art which has been a witness to countless ceremonies and celebrations ever since the palace has come into being.
They used red granite, that is from the Chamundi Hill. So it is rose color one, and some are dark red also, that have been brought and used for the construction of this. There are arches, we call that arch as the keystone arch, which is common in the Indo-Islamic architecture. If you remove the central stone of the key arch, the whole arch will collapse. So that is also there in this architectural style.
Many people, as you said, admire the ceilings, many people admire the pillars, many people admire the Indian carvings on the pillars, and quite a lot of them admire the whole facade, the arches and the domes and everything. It's very difficult to say, this is one aspect of the palace which is admired more than the rest of it. It depends on the visitor's interest and fancy. But I can tell you one thing, in spite of that many people visiting the palace day in and day out, in some way it has retained its tranquility. It's very tranquil.
The Wadiyars also patronized artists. Several of the paintings inside the palace are the artwork of local artists from Mysuru. From pillars to these ceilings, the space is full of gilded art to murals, each telling stories and narrating how ornate ceremonies have been observed by the royals. Even the Travancore royal, Raja Ravi Varma, presented a painting expressing his respect to the kingdom.
The families of many artists like Narasimha Raju, Raju's family we call it as. There are so many Rajus in that family. They were all painters, specialized in painting. The Travancore Raja, he also came and stayed here for many years, and he painted lot of things. That paint have been used in this palace. Raja Ravi Varma. So Raja Ravi Varma the painting style is different, but they have used in this palace for decorating it.
It is this long view rectangular chamber where each space shines with exuberance and amazes us with brilliance in its creation. Welcome to Diwan-e-Khas. The private Darbar Hall, the only space in palace which is still used for royal ceremonies. A royal congregation is held every year on the occasion of Dasara festivities, an elaborate in-house ceremony which goes on for 15 days.
The private darbar they used to for the main for like a cabinet meetings, the conference like that, and one of the representative has to come and also they discuss regarding of the dynasties. So what are the problems of the people? So they used to for that the private darbar. And earlier they used like that, but now also still they use it by the royal family for the Raat Darbar. So Raat Darbar means some rituals is going on. Like during Dasara festival, all the 9 days, now the present, the Maharaja, they wear the tradition dress like a king. So he came to there and sit on the throne. Some 5 to 6 people they came to there and the offerings to them and worships to them.
Once the king and his advisors sat in this very room to discuss the affairs of state. The room is packed with art in every corner, with abstract figures of angels, deities, birds and flowers in bloom. The ceiling too is a testimony of how deftly Krishnaraja Wadiyar chose to replicate the European artwork of tainted glasses inside the beautiful moat space of this palace. The continuous ceiling of tainted glasses illuminates the room with its multiple hues. Connected through an arch with its ceiling, these teak panels gilded with continuous gold sculpting add immensely to the beauty of this intimate palace.
It's got very vibrant colors. They say that, you can do that. Each pillar has got a certain number of facets. If you knock on that, you get different tones. It's made of steel, but it's painted vibrant. They've used bright red, gold and blue, but it looks magnificent. That is where now we conduct our Dasara festivities in that hall, not in the main Darbar hall.
These panels forming a pavilion are held aloft by iron pillars done with an original paintwork in blue and gold. On the floor, each pillar is separated by a marble slab inlaid with semi-precious gems in scroll floral work. Artisans from Agra, known for centuries for their expertise in pietradura, were invited to work on these slabs. The walls here too adorn elaborate plaster of Paris works, sparkled by the beam of light through these windows on one side of the room. And it is this octagonal chamber at the far end of the room which forms as one of the most important as well as cherished spot of the palace. A circular ceiling with tinted glasses crowns over the floor where the royal throne or a simhasan is placed during the functions.
Throne is in the control of three people: Govt of Karnataka, royal family, and the treasury of Mysore. So this locked by all the three, and it will be opened during that time. They fix it, and it will be kept on the Darbar Hall for 9 days. So it's an occasion to see everyone how it will be looking. So that aspect is there, and royal family members like His Highness Yaduvir is still a young man, is still living there.
After the festival is over, it doesn't have to be kept in display, and it's not an item which needs to be displayed, because we attach a lot of religious significance to it.
So during Dasara, they take it out and assemble in the private Darbar hall, and that is also particular time. In that time, so the public was not allowed. So that is assemble in a Darbar hall around 30 to 40 days. So on each and every day, so before that they make it pujas, homas, havanas, and they make it assemble, and after the starting of the Dasara, they used to for the Rat Darbar. After Dasara also around 10 to 15 days, there only they keep it there in the Darbar hall, and after finishing of that, after time, and the Maharaja family, they asked the Raj Purohit. So before that they asked it, but in that particular time, so they removed it and keep it in the safe treasury.
The throne, once a pride of the palace, is now used only during important ceremonies, and one of them is Dasara. In the days of yore, it were the kings who sat on this 750-kilogram throne, of which 80 kilograms is pure gold. The famous Dasara ceremony, also called Dasara ceremony of Mysore, is not just the pride of the palace, but an important cultural and historical landmark of the city. The genesis of this grand celebration lays its origin from Mahanavami festival, a tradition which was started by Raja Wadiyar in early 17th century at their then capital in Srirangapatna. But since the reign of Krishnaraja Wadiyar III, the royals of Mysore have been holding special darbar inside their palace.
Dasara started from Hampi, and then it is from there it has come to Srirangapatna during the time of Raja Wadiyar. The first Dasara we have evidence of Raja Wadiyar 1610 AD. From there Dasara is continuously going a annual processional function of the Wadiyar's family till 1969. After the death of the last king Sri Jayachamrajendra Wadiyar, it was stopped because there was a confusion whether it should go as a royal family function or it should be private function. Then Govt of Karnataka made a committee. The committee decided to make a Nadahabba. The local deity have been kept there, and it is detached from the royal family. Of course, they are making their own private Dasara in the palace itself.
It is grand for an onlooker. People who watch that, it's grand, but the person who observes the festival, it's another religious observation, and then there is no glamour attached to it. It's more of religious ceremonies than any glamour attached to it, because of the way it is conducted. People look at it differently, but for us it is nothing but 9 days of in a day at least 4 or 5 hours goes in pujas. And then the remaining time have to get ready. Morning and evening it's basically pujas.
Today, two separate Dasara ceremonies are held, one in the palace and other in the city. Finest of the artists in Karnataka were commissioned by royals between the years 1934 to 1945 to paint the glory and grandeur of the Dasara procession. Even today, a lot goes into making this ceremony a grand affair, something that truly lives to its great legacy.
When I got married, my mother-in-law was there. She took care of everything. We were kind of carefree. The first time I personally had to look into all that was in the early 80s. Since I had watched my mother-in-law and it was not that difficult. It's a teamwork. Each department does its own kind of thing. Everything is presented as a thing, but many people are involved.
It is 9-day functions. Usually they're very important is they make one day Lakshmi Puja, Saraswati, the goddess of education, and one day before the Dasara they do the Ayudha Puja. Ayudha Puja means all the weapons will be cleaned, washed, worshipped, and then next there will be Dasara procession will be there. It was started by the king, and it was the howdah will be fixed on the back of the elephant. From the date, the howdah weight is 750 kg gold is there, and it is taken from that day. Even now it is continued.
It's not just the procession in the city, but there are other events at this palace which are also steeped in history. Like this legendary Kusti's Pratham, or a wrestling bout involving the wrestlers fighting with metal knuckles.
The Vajramushti bout, the most ferocious bout. Vajramushti meaning fist as hard as diamond. They were displayed to these guests or dignitaries. The Jettys used to wear a hard weapon into their fist, similar to the knuckle dusters, which is called sisters in Rome, and these weapons were footed with sharp knobs and would have a devastating effect on its victim when it is used effectively. They used to wear these weapons, shave their heads, and 2 pairs would perform before the king and the dignitaries until the blood came out. In the earlier days, historic references tell us that Jettys have died fighting this sport.
The king of Mysore was said to be the great patrons of wrestling, and throughout the long rule, a class of wrestlers called Jettys received major encouragement.
They first got tremendous patronage from the kings of Vijayanagar, and the Mysore Wadiyars, being the subsidiary kings of the Vijayanagar Empire, they followed their emperor in patronizing this community of wrestlers. They were not just wrestlers. Senior members of the Jetty community would accompany the king in his hunting expeditions, wars, and they would give him advice on war techniques. They would appraise him about philosophy. They would guide the king morally also.
While the community has now diversified in their skills and work profile in modern times, they were immensely proud of the history and association with the palace.
The Wadiyars of Mysore have given a tremendous patronage to the Jettys, and likewise the Jettys of Mysore also have shown utmost loyalty to the kings. The Jettys migrated from Gujarat in 1099, exactly 900 years ago. And since then, they have lived and dwelt and served their masters to the best of their ability. They have laid down their lives for the sake of their kings.
The celebrations or events in the palace are not just confined to Dasara. The celebration season begins soon after the conclusion of the monsoon season and goes on till late after Diwali.
Our festival season starts from July and culminates after Diwali. So we call it Chaturmasa, the 4 months of festivities. Once the Dakshinayana sets in, that is the sun moves into southern hemisphere, the festival season starts. We used to have kite flying in those days. Of course, now it is you don't see that kite flying festival. You don't see even a single kite. Now, when we were children, we used to have fun flying kites, and it starts with that. That marks the festival season.
This massive arena in front of the palace has been witness to several events and celebrations, symbolically guarded by 4 bronze tiger sculptures, one for each direction. These tigers were sculpted by renowned British sculptor Robert William Colton and installed in the year 1909, soon after the Greh Pravesh by the royals. Inside the palace too, these tiger sculptures carry forward the symbolism of guarding the space, just like the concept of Dwarpal statues in Hindu and Jain temple architecture. 2 of them are placed right opposite the entrance of Kalyan Mantapa, a richly designated master hall where all royal weddings, birthdays and ceremonial functions have been celebrated. From the dome-shaped ceiling with stained glasses to the marble-laid floors, the room is excellence personified in its architecture and its heritage.
All the 4 pillars are 50 feet in height. When it has taken up, on the top they have used stained glasses from Italy. The stained glasses which is having the peacock and some design of its own, giving good light to the inside the hall. In the hot summer, the color light will pass through that and it is maintained. The whole hall is having a balcony, and then 1 floor and the 2 floors. The royal family members used to sit on the balcony, and for the marriage function or any function is going on. Even Dasara procession functions were taking place in that particular place. That is the very attractive place in the palace.
When the palace was constructed, they make it bifurcated, because the Maharaja, they wanted to the privacy. That's why this residential part is separately and ceremonial part is separately. In the ceremonial part, they constructed the marriage hall. The marriage hall they used to for the, not only for the marriage hall, they used to for ceremonial rituals. Each and every time, the lot of festivals is according to that Hindu mythological stories, that we saw that lot of festivals, we saw that existing festivals. So they used to festivals, sometimes some is for personal programs is going on.
The stained glasses dome, a rich tapestry of peacock and floral motifs, is another of living remnants of Krishnaraja Wadiyar's inspiration from European architecture and style of ornate buildings. The dome is supported by beautifully carved iron pillars which were imported from England. The center of Kalyan Mantapa is lit by this huge chandelier. The palace last saw its magnificence and glory amplified at the royal wedding of Yudhavir Krishnadatta Chamaraja Wadiyar, the current custodian of the Wadiyar dynasty.
Most marriages and all these religious functions used to be held in Kalyan Mantapa. It is octagonal. The architecture is again mixture of there are arches, tall pillars and arches, yet blends very well with the pillars and then Indian motifs as pillar capitals and the goddesses and deities and lotuses and things like that. It's a blend of different architectural styles.
Ayudha Puja during Dasara, and they celebrated the Krishna Janmashtami, Ravanami, Deepavali. So they has to celebrate it, but the most important and most celebrated is the Ayudha Puja. So Ayudha Puja regarding the Shashastra Puja, whatever that weapons is there. So all the weapons they are displayed in the marriage hall only because of there is a paintings of regarding of that Ayudha Puja. So that is why they use the marriage hall. Sringeri Math Rajguru also sometimes they visited. So that time is a very longest and beautiful rituals program is going on, like Pada Puja. When used to come the Guru of Sringeri, so the entire royal family they welcomed it, and they came welcomed it through the elephant gate and entered to that marriage hall, and whatever the rituals of Pada Puja they has to held there in that marriage hall. And in that time the public was not allowed to there, so the public will be diverted to another place. And even the marriages and rituals, and when the Maharaja was passed away recently, like in 2013, so his funerals, whatever the funerals is there in the marriage hall only.
The Kalyan Mantapa, just like other chambers, too wears history in all its width and margins. These large portraits and paintings depicting life and times inside the palace adorns the walls of Kalyan Mantapa. There are 26 paintings in all, depicting the vintage Dasara procession, the birthday procession of Krishnaraja Wadiyar IV, the celebration of Krishna Janmashtami, while paintings of Durga Puja, called Ayudha Puja, festival of goddess Chamundeshwari, also adorns the wall. And multicolored floral designs on the floor slabs adds manifold to the beauty of one of the centralmost rooms of the palace. While outside, multicolored columns and pillar carvings depict the scenes from Indian epic stories and legends, once again confirming the status of this room. It wasn't just the rooms and decorated chambers. These spaces between the stairs too witnessed mundane to eventful memories inside the palace. And some of these corridors lead to the private and intimate-most areas of Amba Vilas. It's like the time stays still here. The silence too plays melody to an ensemble of casket housing memories. The ornamental, ceremonial and monumental structure called palace morphs into a home here.
People look at it as a palace, but for us it's a home. We don't look at it as, we don't get overwhelmed or it's that's our, at least it's been like that for my husband and myself.
Since 1977, a part of palace has been open for public, but the remaining portion forms the residence of royals.
However big a place is or however small a place is, you always have, you kind of use a particular area more than I don't mean by saying that that's the favorite place or anything. I prefer to spend more time where there is a lot of light. And there are places, a few places, particularly one just outside my room where I spend most of the time. At least I used to when my husband was around.
The palace was further expanded in the year 1930 during the reign of Maharaja Jayachamrajendra Wadiyar, when he decided to expand Public Darbar Hall wing, the longest and undoubtedly the most busiest of rooms.
Darbar hall they used to for the administrative sections. So before independence they used to for the administrative sections. There is a two darbar halls like a public darbar hall and private darbar hall. So the public darbar hall they used to for the entertainment for music festival and dances, that is only during Dasara festival. But whatever the day-to-day programs like administrative matters, that is all there in the Diwane Khas. That's in private darbar hall.
Just like Diwane Khas, this room too is crossed with pillars, standing for another fine example of balance and symmetry. While roofs are painted with variety of designs, prominent being the texture of sky, the rear walls are dressed with oil paintings with a large portrait showcasing 4 generations of Wadiyars forming the center of the wall.
When they used to the public darbar hall, if you come to the public darbar hall, we saw that view. So there completely the environment of for entertainment only. So like that, like a sitting arrangements, like a sitting arrangement for the musicians and for the dignitaries, for the separate royal ladies galleries. So these are all the main significance of the public darbar hall. When the private darbar hall, earlier in that place the ladies was not allowed. So that is why we can't see that ladies gallery in the private darbar hall. So that is only for the used to for the meetings, the conference, like that.
Every space here is like a walk down the trove of memories. From this portrait to pillars to chairs, each stands guardian to the eras of yore. Time often stops here. The past is present. In this man-made palace, whose foundation was laid to realize a fascinating imagination, Amba Vilas lives on today, carrying forward a legacy of its creator and an epoch in history.
Every common man in Mysore, they respect the royal family. I was seen as a young boy. If the royal family Rolls Royce car is coming out of the royal main gate of the palace, people used to bend their head, bend their knee, and ladies used to cover their pallu on the head, and still the car, even if the king is maybe in the car, may not be there, but people used to respect him like that.
There is no off seasons. It's a entire all 365 days. So the people there they visit the palace. See, when the people used to come to Mysore, like for example, like a marriages, so they used to come to some relative marriage. So the part of they wanted to see that palace.
Even now we meet wherever we go. If people want to talk to you, we always stop and talk to them or oblige. And there is no. Basically, they have been very affectionate. I must say the affection they showed when my husband passed away was very motivating. One of the motivating factors for me to reach where I am today.